Now is the chance to hear from you. I think some questions have been filled out already. And while they are coming to the front, there is a question that had been asked right up front to sort of start this off. If if the saying "first do no harm" is one of the three simple rules, as well as the first rule of medicine, what do you see the 2016 General Conference doing that more than anything else would keep that rule? And I guess it asked negatively, what is it that the 2016 General Conference had better not do so that there is no harm?
I think the thing that the General Conference could do that would help encourage do no harm is to make sure that we keep the table open, that we keep the discussion open, that we keep the discussion at a high level, at a courteous level, at a significant level, but that we keep the table open. And even push harder to encourage others. And I'm not just talking about those people who might be of a more progressive perspective on homosexuality, but I'm talking about everybody. I mean, make sure that we keep the table open.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways we can do no harm first is to just be very forthright, and we need a lot of candor with one another at General Conference. I think I know, I'll be honest, I get a little frustrated with the media, with some of my own folks in the conservative movement who ascribe things to General Conference delegates, whether they be progressive, centrist, or liberal, that are just really not fair. I've been to General Conference. I've watched the delegates. There's not a lot of fighting at General Conference. I just want you to know that. The delegates are, by and large, very respectful of one another. These are clergy people, laymen and women who do great things in their annual conferences, and they are, by and large, respectful. Are sometimes things heated? Well, of course. I mean, who would want to go to a conference where there wasn't anything passionate to talk about? For heaven's sakes, we better be passionate. These are very important matters. And so, but by and large, people are respectful. So I'm not worried about the harm being done at General Conference. What I am worried about is the harm that will be done to the United Methodist Church and its people if the General Conference does not really let it sink in that business as usual is no longer sustainable, that we can't have incremental changes. We have to make dramatic changes. And so I think if the General Conference wants to do no harm, that has to be its main focus on really taking serious action.
Chime in that the three simple rules, the general rules of the Methodist Church. Do no harm is do no harm by abstaining from every form of evil. It's not be sure to be nice to one another, although we're nice people, and Methodists are moderate folks. I had a clergy colleague that was in the UCC church. He was Southern Baptist previously, and he was in the UCC church then. And he said when he heard UCC folks talk about all the conservatives in their denomination, he said, I just told him, you don't know what a conservative is. And when he talked about the Southern Baptists complaining about the liberals in their denomination, he said, you don't know what a liberal is. And I think we're people of the middle, and I think we're going to be nice. And our biggest harm is we just choose nice over getting down to the brass tacks and really talking about the real stuff.
What has happened to the Korean United Methodist Church in regard to growth and its place in world Methodism?
Yeah, well, one thing is that the Korean Methodist Church has exploded over the decades, but the Korean Methodist Church is not a part of the United Methodist Church. So I can't really add much more than that. It's we do have relationships in the same way they're part of the World Methodist Council. Yeah.
Another question. I recently learned about the United Methodist centrist movement created out of the West Ohio Conference, which claims to speak for the 90% of United Methodists who choose to live out their faith in the middle and not take sides on social issues. Where does this group fit into the future of the United Methodist Church?
I don't know where they got that statistic from, for starters. I doubt it. And frankly, I would be very worried. It would sadden me greatly. And I think I could reach across the aisle to my liberal brothers and sisters if 90% of United Methodists don't want to think about social issues. We're in big trouble if that's the case. I personally think that centrism is really harmful and has been hurting the church. That has frankly been one of the problems. We think we can find a middle all of the time, but sometimes in this life, on this side of the veil, we're going to have disagreements, and sometimes they're going to be very profound. I can't be a part of the Roman Catholic Church. I love my Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, but there are some things that just divide us. And so I hope that doesn't gain traction. I don't think it will. I'm not trying to be real nice to my colleague Chris here, but frankly, I think the plans he's worked on have a lot more depth, a lot more thought behind them than that centrist plan coming out of Ohio. And one more thing, I love Bishop Will Willimon once said that one of the big problems with the United Methodist Church is that there's a conspiracy of niceness at work in the church, and I think he was onto something.
Which is a word not found in the Bible, by the way.
Just the centrist movement plan was let's table kind of everything about homosexuality or any of these divisive issues and just work on economic stuff. I think that's exactly backwards. I think the other stuff is we got to deal with the divisive stuff, or else we're going to be stuck in the mud. We've got to talk about the stuff that's dividing us in order to get to the other.
I just want to remind everybody that 67% of all statistics were made up on the spot. And I have no clue where that 90% comes from either. I mean, I think there are some people who live in the middle who are, how's that go? If you neither hot nor cold, I don't want you. So yeah, that's, I think we have issues, and I think we have important and significant issues that we need to deal with, but I think it's important that we deal with them like this, face to face.
Very good. You're going to love this question. To the man from Geneseo. In a few words, what is the difference between evangelistic, charismatic, and mainline Methodists? What are your definitions? I mean, if a fundamentalist is too little fun, too much damn, and too little mental,
Okay, can I use that?
hey, I stole it from someone else.
We throw these labels around. I'm blessed to serve a really dynamic church, and men's ministry is really strong, and prayer ministry is really, really strong. And we've got some folks that were born and raised United Methodists, and then the church grew, and we're kind of the evangelical church in town, and so we have some folks that come. So as a pastor, before they pray over me and lay hands on me, and some might pray over me in tongues, and some, might just pray the Holy Spirit takes me in a whole different direction. And it's just a wonderful church to be part of. But it's not that we're the focus is Jesus in the center, but there's different expressions of what that looks like. And I think that theme has come up more than once here.
What about the gay marriages? I know somebody that is one, which I would assume is referring to legally married and gay. Now, that's a very general question, but any nibbles?
We are obliged to answer that question. It would be a total dodge on every one of us up here to not try and address that, because we know it's a big issue that we're all facing, not only in the church but in the United States. You argued before the Supreme Court tomorrow. It's been the tradition of the United Methodist Church for some time now to say that we do not believe that by Scripture, tradition, reason, experience tells us that that is not God's plan for us to be married male, male, and female, female. And we have upheld that for many years now. I think we will uphold that again in General Conference 2016. It's a very difficult, painful issue. And I would like to say, and I'm sure my colleagues will echo me on this, the way we're talking about it tonight would be is in a political way, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I think politics are necessary, but there's also a pastoral way you handle these issues, and I have a lot of respect for all of my clergy colleagues, and I think they do handle that pastorally, but I hope we would uphold the traditions of the church going forward.
You know, I think our culture, we've reached kind of this this tipping point in our culture where gay marriage has become more and more accepted, and I think the church is going to have to realize that reality along with the foundations of our faith, and that's what we're talking about. What we have right now in the United Methodist Church is 2 jurisdictions that have officially voted to ignore church teaching on homosexuality, and just they have officially voted and said we're going to pretend like we don't say that. And if you have a bishop right now that is willing to go along with you on that, the rules are enforced, and in other places our rules are not enforced under those circumstances, and they are. I think that's I think spotty enforcement is an unjust situation, and I think that's why I think we need to find a way. I think we have people that would rather die than change their mind on both sides, and we need to find a way to live in a duplex somehow, but still under one roof.
I think, Walter, you put it really, really well when you said there's a political and a pastoral perspective on this. And interestingly, I was just taking a look at my records just a few days ago, and 522 weddings that I have performed, celebrated, 522, and they have all been man-woman. And I have hopefully dealt with all of those in a pastoral sense, not with a political sense, not with any idea of what was this going to do for me or how is this going to look outside of this church or anything like that, but how am I helping this couple enhance and cement their relationship under the guidance and direction of God. My hope in myself is that if 2 people of the same sex were to come to me and ask me to celebrate their wedding with them, that I would deal with them in the same way that I have dealt with people who have been of opposite sexes. That I would talk with them, that I would counsel them, and that I would make my decision as to whether or not I would celebrate that wedding or not on the basis of the relationship that I perceived between the 2 people. I recognize very clearly that stands in opposition to disciplinary law. We have been blessed in our annual conference in the 40-some years that I have been a minister in this conference. We have been blessed by bishops who have been consistently consistent in their application of the discipline, I think. And as I recognize that I would be standing, if I did that, I would be standing in opposition to disciplinary law. I would expect that there would be consequences. And as Martin Luther once said, "Here I stand, I can do no other." The dictates of my conscience and my faith would put me at that place where I would have to make that decision.
In the United States, which position of United Methodist Church is growing? the conservative, the moderate, the liberal progressive, and in general, I'm assuming, Protestant Christianity in the country, which position in general is growing, conservative, moderate, or liberal progressive? I guess in part that could be a statistical question.
That's another one of those questions. Wally had a great response earlier. A lot of statistics are thought up on the spot, and I don't have statistics readily at hand. I think a number of people, just in articles I have read over the last 10, 20 years, by and large, the thinking is that more conservative evangelical churches tend to be the growing churches. But a lot of factors, I think, play into that. I don't think we want to reduce the debate to how many people you can get on your team. That might not be the most healthy way to go about it. But I would say this. I think there is something to be said for churches that are committed to being evangelical and sharing the faith of Jesus Christ. They need to be creative, they need to be faithful, but they need to be forthright. When I went to Princeton United Methodist Church and was on staff there, they just hated the idea of wanting to call the evangelism committee the evangelism committee. They really liked that saying that someone thought up, if you have to witness, say as few words as possible. And, that grates on me. We have to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yes, we need to use our hands and our feet and all of that, but you have to articulate the faith.
How would appointments work in the two-layered church?
Well, there's whole annual conferences would join a jurisdiction. So a jurisdiction is made up of annual conferences. So it would work exactly as it works now. The annual conferences would have a bishop, and the bishop would make the appointments. It's really a sort of a minimal, it's not a radical change. You take in Illinois, for instance. Let's say, I don't know this would be the case, but let's say Illinois Great Rivers Conference would vote to go with a more conservative jurisdiction. And the Northern Illinois Conference, by reputation, is more progressive theologically. Let's say they went with the other. Maybe you would end up with two Illinois conferences. Maybe the Illinois Great Rivers Conference would develop a Chicago district to deal with, to take the churches that opted out of the Northern Illinois Conference's direction. And maybe the old Northern Illinois Conference would create a downstate district or two to take the churches that felt like that was a better missional match. But you would have two conferences that cover the state of Illinois, and you might have a town like Champaign that has a church, United Methodist Church of each jurisdiction. In one of my versions, there's churches indicate their jurisdiction on their signage and letterhead, so they would say, "We're United Methodist Church." We have maybe a slightly different logo, and just to kind of send the signal that this is. But really, the appointments would work exactly the same, except there'd be some sorting to do.
As I suspected, we have about 16 more questions. We will not try to answer all of those now because we are at our time limit. But what I will do is I will ask two more. And then we'll make sure that our participants each have copies of all of the questions that they may respond as they see best, either in an email or whatever other venue. And we will see that that is appropriately posted as part of the outbrief and the follow-up for our conversation this evening. One of the questions that of the two that I will ask as we bring this part to a close is, it's addressed to Chris, but it also has I think a wider application. How would your plan affect future possible merger with the AME or CME churches, African Methodist Episcopal and Christian Methodist Episcopal?
In my original plan, I included some, and of course it's kind of weird to sit down and write paragraphs of the Book of Discipline and all that. That's a whole different legislative language. But I included the possibility that other Methodist denominations could join as their own jurisdiction. They could become part of the United Methodist Church as their own jurisdiction. Now, mine's greater than mine. my brother Randy Robinson is here tonight. He said that's probably not the best way to do ecumenical relations, saying you can join our denomination as your own jurisdiction. There's probably a deeper discussion that needs to. But I wanted to put something hopeful in there, because if we are a bigger tent church, the reason why we're not merging with AME and AMEZ and CME is slightly different understandings of how bishops work. And if we could general conference together and allow that diversity, I think we could see Methodism come to greater unity. And so I think that's hopeful. And I think if we allow ourselves some diversity, there's a possibility that it could create greater overall Methodist unity, even though in the United States we would be doing some different things.
This last question then, and to you all briefly, how do you see the United Methodist Church equipping youth for their calling? In the light of what we've been discussing tonight.
Sure. Well, I think that the church as a whole is really just kind of ramping up to that. I think they would have actually, if the call to action plan had gone through, they would have had a bigger chunk of change to put towards that. I think that they were hoping to have $5 million to put into that, and that kind of came down. I don't know how that worked out since the Judicial Council found it unconstitutional. But I think exciting things are happening in seminaries that, we all know that young people grow up with social media, with information technology that we just kind of have to learn how to use, where it's part of their world. Matter of fact, I love this. One of my nieces, her little boy, they gave him a set of Uno cards for Christmas, and it was all shrink wrapped. And the first thing he did was try to get the cards to swipe. He looked to him like something that ought to swipe and move, And so that's the world they live in. They expect that kind of stuff to happen. And I think what Asbury is doing in terms of helping students who are coming with those skills to leverage information technology and social media, young people are going to come along and do things that we just can't even imagine right now. And I think that's going to be exciting to see. And I think we have to do everything we can to help equip them with our seminary so that they can do that.
I'm going to be really surprised if I don't start standing up and preaching again, because this is really one of my big issues. And I'm going to speak on it from an annual conference perspective. It seems like it ends up being an issue of dollars, and I get really aggravated with our annual conference. And I'll take on anybody about this if you want. I'm up here. Come on. And that is that we end up having less and less and less dollars. And where do we cut things? We cut things starting with youth and then going to camps and then going to campus. And we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We say that the youth are the future of the church, but then we don't do anything about it. You've heard this said, right? A church never has money problems. A church has spirit problems. And thank you. If we could get a glimpse of the vision, remember that, what was that, catch the spirit sort of a thing that we had going on? If we could have something like that going now for our youth and for our college kids, for our young adults, then maybe we would be able to see some more future, some more light in our future as the United Methodist Church. But in order to do that, we've got to put some money into it, but we don't. Maybe I need to be quiet now.
It's all right, brother. Okay. In a moment, I will ask each of our three participants to make a brief closing statement. I do want to affirm that every question that I have received will be posted. And so the fact, if you wrote a question and it was not specifically addressed in this forum because of our lack of time, it will be addressed and up there in other venues for response. And with that, again, well, while you're still on a roll, brother.
Who, me?
Yeah, you got off that dry profession with the Holy Ghost possession, so have at it again.
You give a preacher a microphone. Hey. I really don't have anything else to say. I am grateful for the opportunity to have been here, for whoever it was who gave you my name. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm absolutely certain that not everybody here agreed with everything I had to say, but my wife loves me, you know, and does she agree with everything that I say? Mm-mm-mm. But you know what? We're still able to make it work. I also think the church can make it work too. I have great hope for the United Methodist Connection as well as for the Worldwide Methodist Connection.
My wife loves me too, and I appreciate everyone's kind attention. Structural solutions are not very fun. I mean, they're pragmatic rather than passionate sometimes. But I do believe we need a solution in the United Methodist Church. And as a United Methodist elder, I've felt the call of God to do my best to try to find some way forward. I think there's a lot of inadequate solutions out there, and I'm sure mine are inadequate in some ways as well. But if you're interested in following along, you can jurisdictionalsolution.org. peopleneedjesus.net is my blog, and I write about not just my plan, but other plans to kind of critique, because I think we need to, I think a lot of it won't just, we're in a social media world now, and a lot of these things will be worked out by just all of us working together, and I think we can approach General Conference like a constitutional convention to reinvent our church if we get some leadership from our bishops, and if we do some of this kind of work that we're doing tonight. Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you very much. And I just have a few closing remarks. And I know this might sound heretical, but I do not think the United Methodist Church, particularly as it is currently configured and as it practically operates these days, I don't think it is essential to the spread of the gospel and the work of the Church Universal. Don't get me wrong. I would much prefer to see it be a healthy and vital branch that bears fruit for the witness of the whole church. But if the church is going to largely be seen as a constantly bickering and divisive church, then I would prefer its dissolution sooner than later so that we can all get on with what we regard as more essential matters. We should not make a fetish or a shibboleth of the words united or unity. The primary mission of the church is not to be united, particularly if that unity is at the expense of proclaiming the gospel and lordship of Jesus Christ, and particularly if it's at the expense of leading people to lives of faithful discipleship and working for God's justice, mercy, and truth in our communities and the world. It will be a sad day if we march into oblivion united because we refuse to do challenging and hard things. Unfortunately, the U.S. expression of the United Methodist Church on the whole has not been successful at fulfilling its principal mission over the past 45 years. But please do not misunderstand me. I am not suggesting that there have been no successes and that there are none now. I pointed out some in my opening remarks, and I could point out more if I needed to. But more often than not, these successes, whether in local churches or seminaries, have come about not because of the denomination's bureaucracy. And the truth be told, sometimes they have come about despite the church's bureaucracy. I think most of our leaders know that. They know the model we currently have is unsustainable and must be radically changed sooner than later if the UM Church is to survive. However, the sexuality debate, which many United Methodists regard as simply the presenting issue for more fundamental disagreements among the church's people, is a major obstacle to our moving forward with an agenda that would reconfigure and revitalize the church for the 21st century. Since its creation, and I'm going to give a few statistics as I close here, and I want to say, I'm not a statistics guy. I was terrible in math and never emphasized that. But I want you to remember, every number I cite here, they all represent people. Every one of these numbers represent people. Since its creation in 1968, the United Methodist Church in the U.S. has gone from a church of 11.1 million members to 7.3 million members in 2013. That was when we last had the data from GCFA. That's a net loss of 3.8 million churches. That's just too big of a number for me to get my head around. We have suffered a net loss of 85,000 to 90,000 members annually for 45 consecutive years. That is equivalent to losing a 231-member local church every day of every year
for the last 45 years straight. In that time span, the U.S. population has grown by 57.8%, while United Methodist Church membership has dropped 31.2%. Over a third of the church has been lost. Since 1968, we have gone from 42,105 local congregations in the U.S. to 32,635, for a net loss of almost 10,000 local churches. Of the 32,635 local churches left, 71% of them average less than 100 in worship attendance. And even more alarming, over 51% of our local churches average less than 50 people in worship on Sunday morning. Because of the average age of United Methodist in the U.S. and their increasingly smaller family sizes, in the immediate future, we are likely to see an acceleration in the annual decline of membership and worship attendance. These are major institutional challenges we have not owned up to. Instead, we have spent valuable time, energy, and resources consumed with internal divisions over social and theological issues. I know people love to cry unity, unity, but I respectfully and imploringly have to ask, what has unity, if you can even really call it unity, got us in the past 45 years? I fear the call for unity has become a distraction that keeps us from owning up to genuine, deep, and heartfelt, irresolvable differences, and also keeps us from addressing the systemic changes we must confront before circumstances entirely overwhelm us. I have hope. I will always have hope. But I also know hope must be exercised in doing our duty in our time and in our place. I would pray that we have the courage to exercise it. Thank you.
Again, I would like to thank our participants this evening for coming and sharing from their hearts and sharing with such grace the various points of view. I thank you for your questions and for your attentiveness and for laughing at my jokes. I want you to know that afterwards, I think our colleagues will be around for a while, so if any of you do want to give the bums rush, here are the bums, and the rush is all yours. And as we conclude, I invite you to pray with me. Be present at our table, Lord. Be here and everywhere adored. Your servants bless, and grant that we may feast with thee eternally. Amen.